Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Explode Your Expert Business Show. This is the podcast for experts who want to grow their businesses while making an impact in the world. And we go live and we release the episode a couple of times a week, one with a guest, then we interview clients, and also there are some solo shows that I do to share the behind the scene of the work that we do here at GTeX. So if you want to become an authority in your field, you want to learn from other experts, influential people in their field, then this is the right place for you. And the episode that we are going to talk, the conversation that we have today, is around marketing in a post-pandemic world. As you know, things have changed. Things have changed, and our marketing needs to adapt. The way we talk to clients needs to adapt, and that's why what our guest is going to talk about. But before we introduce our guest, I want to remind you that if you haven't downloaded yet our database, where you can find a publicity database, where you can find more than 500 publications and 200 podcasts that are looking for experts with all the templates, the follow-up sequences, the email to send to get booked and featured, then make sure you get it right now. You can find it at gtex.events/publicity-bundle. So it's gtex.events/publicity-bundle, or just scroll down in the show notes and you will see it there. As well, if you are the first time you are joining us, if you like the episode, which I'm sure you will, make sure you subscribe and also leave us a review. Let us know at the end what you like. Having said that, it's time to introduce our guest for today. My guest today is Angelo Ponzi. We got a fellow Italian, but he's in the US. And Angelo provides consulting, interim, and fractional marketing services, focusing on the strategic and analytical side of marketing, taking a holistic approach to drive business growth. Consider him like your marketing architect, using research to gather the necessary insight from customer, prospect, competitors, and the market to develop fact-based approaches to building effective and efficient plans. And today we will talk about marketing in a post-pandemic world. Angelo, welcome to the show.
Simone, thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. I'm excited to be on your show and to hopefully share some insights to your listeners.
First of all, you have Italian origins, so tell me your favorite Italian dish.
Oh boy,
Hmm.
my favorite Italian dish. It's going to sound simple, but it's spaghetti and meatballs.
Hey.
And 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 I have this kind of rule that I have is whenever I go to an Italian restaurant for the first time, I taste their meatballs. And if their meatballs are good, then everything else I know is going to be good. But if their meatballs taste like sawdust or whatever other context they have in there, I immediately get turned off. I live in California, but I grew up in New York. And
Mhm.
so, a lot of Italians, a lot of home cooking. My grandmother had a pot big enough to cook a human in it. I mean, it was so freaking big. Family dinners were 14, 15 people. And so, you grew up in that. I mean, they're from the old country or from the
Mhm.
new country, depending on how you want to look at it. And so I have a particular taste when it comes to Italian. And a lot of times here in California, you just don't get that cooking style.
Yeah.
Interesting, quick story. I found a restaurant. I loved it. I've been there eating there for years. And one day I met the owner and I started talking to him. And it turned out to be the reason I loved the food because he was from New York. I had no idea.
It's like I knew there was something special in
There
these
was,
meatballs that
oh my God. Yeah, they were fantastic. They were fantastic.
and it is I think is a great analogy as well in terms of marketing. I'm assuming that if you said if I test their meatballs, if they're not good enough, I know the rest is not going to be good enough, because if you miss the basics or some of
Yes.
the basic dishes, then even the other ones, that maybe they're not going to be that great because you cannot even get the basics right. And I can see the analogy in marketing.
Oh, you know, you're absolutely right. And that's the conversation I have a lot of time with people is they'll say, are you an expert in whatever, pharmaceuticals? And I said, it doesn't matter. I'll learn that, but I can't learn to be an expert at marketing overnight. And so it's back to the basics. I don't care what business anybody's in. There's certain basics and processes and steps you need to take to really identify your target audiences, how to market to them, growth strategies. There's I don't call it a process, but there are certain fundamentals that you have to understand how to approach that. And
Mhm.
sometimes that gets blurred with, hey, I need a website, I need a digital marketing campaign. Yeah, you probably do, but there's a whole lot of other things you need first.
Before we talk about how things have changed in now in this pandemic or post-pandemic world, let's. I'm curious about what inspired you to start this marketing career.
Oh, you know what? I've been doing it now for 25 plus years. And I started off in the advertising business, working for advertising agencies. Actually, my first agency was an agency at the time called Bozell, and it was a global organization. So I got some big, broad exposure. And then I went client side and pretty much have jumped back and forth between client side and agency side. And at one point in time, I decided that I was going to become a consultant. And then that ended up morphing into my own agency. And so I just always felt that instead of complaining about clients and they didn't know what they were doing, I wanted to become one.
Mm.
And I learned what it was like to sit on that side and how to deal with agencies. And so this time around, when I started this company in 2014, it just grew out of frustration. Once again, I was director of sales and marketing for an organization. They got acquired. The new people didn't understand what my division did, and I could see over time they were just eroding our capabilities. And I didn't really have the wherewithal to go through that kind of transition again. And I decided after 2.5 years, I'm just going to go off and run my own thing once again.
And it's like, okay, I just need to be in charge here.
Well, yeah, and it wasn't as much as being in charge, but controlling my own destiny.
Yeah.
So when I joined this organization, it was a small company, and they were. I was told by the recruiter, "Oh, there's all these opportunities. You could get stock and all these kinds of things." 6 months in, they sold it to a big technology company,
Hmm.
and they were after a piece of our business. There was some government stuff. But over time, I recognized he just didn't understand. The CEO would come out, and we'd pass in the hallways, we'd talk, and he didn't really care about what I was doing. I actually got chastised one time that it took me 6 months to land my first $50,000 project with Disney,
Hmm.
and it was like, why did it take so long? Why don't you just pick up the phone, call? I said, it doesn't work that way.
Because it's Disney.
Yeah,
Because actually, 6 months to land Disney as a client
it was.
is not that bad.
No, it was not bad at all. I was really proud of myself. Of course, they deflated that, and so he retired and a new CEO came in, and I gave him a lot of credit. He wanted to hear from all the department heads. And so I'm in this meeting presenting what we're doing, but sitting next to me is the original CEO. And so I made my presentation. I sat down. He leaned over to me and says, wow, what you do is really fascinating. And I looked at him and I wanted to say, are you kidding me? You've been like the CEO of this company for 2 years. We've been talking, and he had no idea what we did. I knew that was the case, and he proved it. So I was
Mhm.
like, that's just not an
I'm
organization for
out.
me anymore. And I moved on.
I'm curious to know what were some, if you think about all the projects that you have done, is there one particular project that stands out, either because you absolutely loved it or was particular? It's like the best project you have been involved in.
Well, that's a good question. There's been a lot of good ones. I mean, I would say I worked in the wine industry for a while, and the Jackson family, which is Kendall Jackson or La Crema, and those
Hmm.
were interesting projects because they were really comprehensive. We got to do everything we needed to do. We did research, we did strategy, we did creative execution, and we did plans. But I remember so going through that process, it allowed us to really do the job we needed to do. So that was a lot of fun. But when I was working on La Crema, for example, I traveled around the country trying to understand why the brand was growing and why people loved it, because there was nobody knew why. It was just all of a sudden it was exploding, and we knew they had it in the bottle, but from a brand standpoint, we just didn't understand.
Hmm.
So stuff like that. I mean, those were really exciting projects. I worked on a household cleaner that was doing market expansion and doing a lot of line extensions, and so going out into the marketplace and testing all these new products. So I mean, those were fun. And then on the flip side, I've done product testing for Solomon ski boots and for skateboard shoes. So I can't say I've got a particular one that I would say that is my favorite, because I've got a lot of favorites. But there's some interesting ones. Like we were testing, a new client was coming to us, and they were a margarine, like a butter, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
But a
yeah.
like, I can't believe it's not butter. It's not them, but somebody like them.
Hmm.
So we're
Hmm.
having these conversations. They're probably in our third meeting. It's our potentially last meeting, and they tell us we finally have product. We're going to bring it to eat. So have some bagels ready or whatever, and we'll bring it to eat in the meeting. And so they did, and we're buttering our bagels, and we start taking bites, and you could see everybody's eyes. It was horrible, just horrible. You know. And so now we're all thinking, and kind of the post analysis is like, oh my God, what are we going to do with this? Because it didn't taste very good at all. So I have a few of those stories where
So don't you have an internal conflict in that moment? Because now you got to come up with an interesting marketing campaign for something that you don't like.
Well, in that particular case, we had let them know we had decided to pass,
Mm.
because it really, to your point, it's a conflict. How do we market something that we know that wasn't good? We had another story like that where it was a fast food chain, and we realized that we had never eaten there. So about an hour before the meeting, we all ran across the street and ate at one of the chains. And then during the meeting, one by one, everybody started excusing themselves, and everybody got
Wow.
intestinal issues. And
Wow.
so we passed on that one too, because obviously you couldn't represent a company that the stuff wasn't good. So yeah, so I mean, there's probably a few of those interesting stories. But yeah, there's always a challenge, and when I think about marketing a particular product, I mean, it really, I say this over and over and over again, and I'll say it to your audience, it's about knowing your customer. It really is so important that you could have the greatest product in the world, but if you are not relevant to them and figuring out a way to solve their problem, they're just, they're not going to buy it. And there
Yeah.
is competition. If anybody tells you or tells me I don't have any competition, there's
Now you do.
always competition, right? And so back to your point, it's the basics. It's understanding those basics and digging in and really deconstructing everything, as opposed to like deconstructing the competitors, deconstructing the marketplace, and looking for those nuances and opportunity gaps, if you will, that you can take advantage of.
So let's look at the meatballs of marketing in this episode. That's what we are
Yeah, there
going
you
to.
go.
The meatballs of marketing. I think I
That's the new
might change.
title.
I might change the title of the episode. The meatballs of marketing in a post-pandemic world. That's gonna
There.
be the title. Is gonna be after the live.
And maybe
So
as a promo, you can make meatballs and we can send them around the world.
I love it. So now, how things have changed now? What have you seen? Because now you're working with a lot of clients. They had to adapt the way they were marketing. So I would love actually to look at the timing. How did you find from the moment of the first COVID cases, or actually, or let's not put first COVID case from the moment of the first like big shutdown
Sure.
to now? How did you find the marketing of companies uh, evolving in such a short period of time?
Right, right. So what happened is, and I'll call it a recession. Okay. I look at, even though it's a pandemic, I look at it as a recessionary time. And the reason I did is because I wanted to understand what happened in history. Well, the last pandemic was 1918. There wasn't a whole lot of data on it. And so but there were multiple recessions, and we started seeing the economy tank. We started seeing businesses preserving cash, right? So what happened with me and happened to other people that I know in marketing, their clients stopped marketing, started looking to cut their fees, drop out, not do anything, because they wanted to build that operational cash, if you will, so they could stay afloat. In doing research and looking at previous recessions, what companies did, I wrote some articles on this and did a lot of lecturing, is that was the biggest mistake they could make. The biggest mistake a company could make in a time like this, any recession, and we're going to have another recession, I'm positive, going forward, and if it's not now, there's going to be one in the future, is the reaction is stop everything. But marketing is an investment, not an expense. And when you drop out of the market, and if your competition doesn't, or you stop being present in front of the minds of your customers, you potentially have damaged your brand. And time again, it has proved in history that those that continue to invest, and maybe they've modified their investment, but those that continue to invest, when they come out of the recession, they have a much better chance of defeating their competition and continuing to grow their business versus just trying to survive. And so it's been proven over and over and over again. There's tons of articles. Like I said, I wrote about this and have a blog on it. And so that was probably from early February, let's say, or late February, when everybody started pulling back because now the pandemic looked real, right into May. And right around May, I started getting calls. People saw me speak or whatever, and they wanted to talk about this idea. And so into June and July, I started getting calls about putting together proposals. But a lot of people were still hesitant. They were looking for, I don't know, a silver bullet, if you will. You know, I need that silver bullet. And I always jokingly say there's silver bullets are only good for killing werewolves or pretending you're the Lone Ranger, right? Other than that, there is no silver bullet in marketing. And so having those conversations, they were unclear on their path. And so I spent a lot of time trying to help get clarity on what is the path forward and how can they start to reinvest and re-engage with their customers. Then I'm going to say in August, it started to really flip. Companies that had not been doing anything now wanted to start investing again. But not only invest in marketing, they wanted to start to invest in research. Now they were unclear, back to not having a clear path. They don't know, because what I would say to them, do you know what damage was done in the markets that you serve? I have a company that works in the Christmas industry. Well, their customers are malls, entertainment centers, shopping centers. Well, those have been extremely hurt by the pandemic. So their market, even the company is surviving and thriving to some degree, right? They're still there. Their marketplaces have dried up a little bit. So you have to understand what kind of damage was done in the marketplace that you serve. Then you have to start looking at strategies. Can I expand? Can I look at different markets with the same products that I have and start looking at various strategies? So that's that kind of evolution of where I'm at right now in seeing and speaking, but also dealing with clients.
It's been really interesting on how just so many different stages in such a short space of time. It's almost like what would happen normally in a period of years in the history of a company, and it happened in a period of a few months.
Yeah, well, exactly, and that's a great point. What happened quickly. There's a quote, and I believe it's the CEO of Microsoft, and it said, the digital transformation has been accelerated. That we've experienced 2 years of digital growth in 2 months. And again, McKinsey has put out a bunch of research on this, and some others, that digital transformation has changed the way people work. Right. So there was a statistic that I used to quote. It's like 85% of customers are online and evaluating and identifying who their potential partners are. Right. Well, after I actually read the study, the 85% is true, but it's more interesting than that. There's been an 85% increase between 2016 and 2019 of people now doing their initial research online. But even more important, the evaluation that they're doing online. So things like digital, online demos and helping people get to the next stage in the funnel. has increased in the same time period 239%. So that online presence now and is becoming even more important than it ever has. Why? We're working at home. We're having a Zoom conference. We have them. I don't know. This is probably, it's late in the evening for you. This is probably your fifth or sixth of the day. It's already my second of the day, and I'm in the morning. And so we're doing that. I mean, I've already researched 3 things online and set up 2 demos of products that I find interesting. So that dynamic shift has changed, and companies really need to recognize that. And it's not only has it changed, it's going to stay.
It definitely is a fascinating time, as you mentioned. It's like we experienced this like 2 years of digitalization in a couple of months, and a lot of companies and people as well. If you're looking at small like businesses, like 1, 2 people in the business, where they had to adapt really quick. I mean, we were lucky with GTeX because even if though we were an event company, and we still are an event company and training company, but we went from running 200 events a year, and we had an online presence, a digital presence, but our aim is to get people online and then get them to move offline.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the pandemic changed completely our business model, but I was really lucky because I could play the online game. It's just I chose not to focus majorly on the online game because I love the event industry. And so for us, we were really lucky. Actually, we changed really like in a month or everything, and experience like actually a growth in this period, because now we don't have all the venue costs that we had before. It's like before we spent like 50, 60 grand a year just in venues. They're not happening anymore right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that there are a lot of companies that either like I was really blessed that I spent so much time learning about digital marketing, conversion campaigns, and so on. But there are not a lot of people that they've thrown themselves in the deep end right now, and so now they need to have this. Is a matter of life or death. Either you learned about this stuff, or your business is out. So if someone now still needs to adjust, or they've started researching but they don't really know where to go in terms of the development of their marketing campaigns, what points would you suggest someone to for that every company should use?
Yeah, I mean, if I understand, I mean, I think the steps that I think a company needs to take, and again, back to what I said earlier, they need to understand their customers, their marketplace, and their competition. I mean, a simple approach is you have to really dissect that.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it, if you're looking at how your customers are consuming information, right? Are they still old school and getting, magazines, or are they doing everything online? Are they watching videos? And then in this flip side, looking at your competition. How is your competition marketing? I sign up when I'm working with a client. I sign up for all their emails and their newsletters. Why? Because I wanted to see what they're doing. I want to see how they nurture me to move down the channel, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's that investigation. And I'm a big stickler on competitive analysis. And most companies tend to do it once a year, and they think they've done it. And to me, it's ongoing. And it's how do you set up this ongoing analysis and taking this information and feeding it back into the organization? Why? Because I believe if you're not watching your competition, they're watching you. And so just those simple basics, but more importantly, watching what they're doing. I've worked with companies before, and they said, "Oh, we got a great digital presence. We're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, whatever it happens to be." And then I go to their sites, and it's like, "Well, you haven't posted in 9 months. That's not a digital presence." So to me, it's like, if you're not going to use it, take it down, because I think it does more damage. So just because these social channels, for example, are available, doesn't mean you need to use them all. I always say to companies, let's pick 1 or 2 or 3 that make the most sense, and let's do them well. Then we can expand, right? Don't go to YouTube. I love this. I was like on a site the other day, and they had a YouTube. It literally was Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And I went to the YouTube site. The last video they posted was 7 years ago.
Yeah,
That's
it just
embarrassing.
shows that you don't care. It shows that I don't even know if you're in business anymore if I go to the
Exactly.
YouTube channel.
Exactly. So when it comes to the kind of the tactical strategies, I think there's some certain aspects that you need to do, but I think it's rooted in what your customers, right?
Okay.
Understanding and that buyer persona, if you will, to understand how they consume information is going to help guide.
I have a question around
actions.
competitors analysis. Do you have something that you would advise someone is listening right now to get started with that?
I do. Actually, if you go to my website, www.theponzigroup.com,
Mhm.
on there is an ebook called Establishing a Competitive Intelligence Program, kind of a step-by-step guide on how to establish and how to utilize competitive intelligence. That's the best offer I have because, and it's free, but I spent a lot of time putting that together because I was frustrated with a client one day because they didn't understand. So I ended up, by the time I did all the research and told them, I decided to put together an ebook. So there's an ebook there on how to do that. Because again, it's not difficult, but the one thing I do advise anybody who's thinking about that is don't hand it over to a junior person, don't hand it over to the receptionist. Put someone in charge of it. And part of being in charge means they have to be responsible for reporting that information. Collecting information and doing nothing with it is basically nothing. You'll appreciate this. I was in a meeting and the client was showing me their SWOT for early in 2019.
Mhm.
I said, "This is fantastic." I said, have you been doing these?" They go, "Oh yeah, we've been doing them for 5 years." I said, "Great, can I see them all?" They said, "Sure." And they gave them to me and I laid them out side by side and they virtually did not change in 5 years. So it's like,
Still the
well,
same.
you did it, but you didn't do anything with it, right? So you just can't go through the motions, putting together a plan that you don't implement, putting people in charge and setting up milestones and whatever the KPIs happen to be. I mean, that's how you move the business forward. And so yeah, I'm going to get off on tangents. I don't want to do that. But really, is the competitive thing is so important to me because just by dissecting, I just finished a project where we deconstructed 5 of our competitors' websites, my clients' competitors'
Hmm.
website. I knew their brand personalities. I knew their messaging strategies. I also could look for gaps in the way they weren't communicating
Yeah.
properly. And and we do a thing called keywords, and I look for kind of commonality in all the words that they're talking about. Which ones I use a word cloud, and I see which ones kind of blow
Yeah.
up the
Yeah.
biggest. So I can say these are important, table stakes or ante if you're a poker player that need to be important. Now, how do we say it differently than everybody else? That's the challenge. But if everybody's saying, whatever, XYZ, then maybe it's important because your biggest competitors are all saying that. So from a messaging standpoint, we can just make an assumption that it's important. Now, how do we say it differently than everybody else so that it's relevant to the customer? And the other thing
Hmm.
I do advise people is don't talk about yourself, talk about the value you bring to your customers. Then, it's like our products are great. You're going to love us. They're going to last a long time. Man, that's great. Everybody
Blah
says that.
blah blah blah
Blah,
blah
blah,
blah
blah,
blah.
right? So talk about the value and how your customers are going to benefit from all of that. Then you can tell them about all the wonderful reasons why for your product, right? But you've got to have that why is it going to benefit them? And so many times I just look at customers' web or client competitors' websites or clients' websites, and they talk about how great they are. And frankly, who cares?
We've been in business since 1955.
Yeah.
It's like great, great for you.
Yeah, well, that's and the other thing I do is I look at differentiation strategies, and
Mm.
you just said something that triggered me. As I remember, and I've worked with several companies. They go, well, one of our biggest points of differentiation. We've been in business for 30 years. I go, wow, fantastic! I love that. Now, is that a true differentiation, or is that just a reason to believe us? Oh no, it's a true differentiator. So I examined the competitors, and I said, well, interesting. This competitor has been in business for 23 years. This one's been in business for 30 years. This one's been in business for 20. So your competitors can say the same thing. So I can't really
Yeah.
differentiate you, and it has no value as a differentiator to say, we know our stuff because we've been in business this long, because everybody else can say that. So how do you truly differentiate based on something that's valuable to your customers, rare, that means your competitors don't have it, and is difficult to imitate? You know, sometimes I got this whiz bang technology. My first question is, how long does it take to copy it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to tell you how long you're going to have a point of differentiation.
And how long you're going to be in business.
Right.
As
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Is really interesting. I want to move into the next part because I want to ask a few questions about finding differentiators. What we're going to do, we're going to put the link of the ebook that Angelo mentioned in the show notes. So make sure that you scroll down the show notes, get the ebook around competitor analysis because it's crucial. I'm just definitely going to use it because I have an eye on it, I have a pulse on it, but I don't do it meticulously or consistently. So I'm definitely looking forward to downloading the ebook and using it. Angelo, I want to now move. You mentioned about differentiator, and this is definitely one of the things that makes a difference in a post pandemic world, because now. What I found, and I don't know if you found the same as well, but as a consumer myself, observing myself and observing other people I'm with, I do more research now that I was doing before the pandemic, before buying a product or a service. I don't know if you come across the same point or it's just something that I'm doing because I became a bit more skeptical. What's your view on that?
Uh, that's an interesting question. I'm going to probably agree with you that I spend a little more time, and I think we're inundated with more messaging right now. We've always been inundated. I mean, I forget the latest statistics. There used to be like 5,000 messages a day, then it's 10,000 messages. I mean,
Now it's like billions of messages a day.
yeah, we could do nothing but just read emails and go look at things all day long. So we're making conscious choices. I'm sure like you get a stream of emails every day, and you don't want to totally unsubscribe because you never know when you're going to get something interesting. So I just start deleting stuff, right?
I never know
And
when Black Friday hits when I can open the email.
yeah, I got to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, it's so funny. One of my sons sent me an email, says, Black Friday starts Friday, you got to send me all your stuff. It's like, yeah, trust me, there'll be lots of deals, but yeah, you're paying attention to what's going on. And so I think that because we're home in a sense, and people are working, they have more time on their hands, or they're working longer hours or sitting in front of the screen. So I think there's a lot more. It's just, but again, I don't think this is going to change. I think we're seeing a fundamental shift in the way we'll work going forward. Productivity is up for a lot of organizations. And of course, there's, those that are spending whatever, $750 a square foot on office space. They don't need to have that expense anymore. Well, I know, like with you, I mean, you can pivot when time go back to stage, but you can also continue what you're doing and save yourself a lot of money because you don't need the overhead, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to see those fundamental switches.
We will go back to events as soon as we can, but instead of running 200 a year, we already cut down to 30 to 40, and having the rest of them being online. So already there's been a structural change moving forward.
The one thing I do want to say with this kind of online research and shopping, if you will, is I have found that a lot of brands are making a lot of promises and they're not delivering on those promises. So anybody who makes a demo promise or try our software, it's very difficult to build the credibility of a brand and certainly get to a point of loyalty.
Yeah.
Brand building takes time, and it literally takes moments to destroy years worth of work. A case in point, I've been solicited by the software company sales program, sales CRM, and so it's simple to use, easy to use, blah, blah, blah. So I finally acquiesced and I said, okay, I'll give it a shot, 14-day trial. So I put in 2 or 3 different customers. I wanted to see how I could track it, how easy, but I got confused very quickly. And I'm the hunting and pecker, right? I don't like to read all the instructions. I just start clicking. If I can figure it out, and I couldn't figure it out. I emailed them twice, and it was like, if you have trouble, send this, contact us. So I contacted them a couple times, asked for a demo. I sent them emails, and in 14 days, I never heard from them. So they lost a customer, but more importantly, here I am today. I haven't mentioned their name and I won't, but here I am today. I could literally mention their name and your thousands and thousands of listeners are going to go, I don't want to try that product. Right. So I don't know. So it's very important that it doesn't take much to destroy a brand, and it takes a lot to build it.
Yeah. So when you are talking, last question, if you want to differentiate yourself, where can a business start? Where would you start from a business point of view? What is one thing that someone can do to be clear on their differentiating points?
Yeah. So what I have stakeholders in the company do individually, I have them list what they think their key differentiators are. And then I get them all together. And so a company can do this, and then get together and have someone be the point person and really look and examine what that list is, and then think about their competition. Things like we hire great people or we have great people is not a differentiator. Why? Because they have great people. Right? We've been in business, to your point, 30 years. Well, maybe they've been in business 30 years. You can't, it's a reason to believe us. It maybe not be a true differentiator unless you've been in business 30 years and everybody else has been in business for 5 years or 10 years.
Yeah.
Then you can claim it. But when it gets into technology and things like that, if, we're easy to use, well, they're easy to use. But if you've got a piece of technology, for example, that is very valuable in what you're offering, it's difficult, it's rare in the sense that nobody else has it, and it's difficult to imitate. It might take a competitor years. That's, to me, a distinct competitive advantage. Or you've got a distribution network that nobody else has, something you can capitalize on. How long? It kind of depends on how quickly they can imitate it, right? So I look at valuable, rare, and whether it's easy to imitate or not. And that's kind of the smell test I put against whatever the criteria is, and really push back to make people say, can you really benefit from that? And if you can, then we've got something that we can differentiate on.
I love it. I love it. And for someone that is, for example, like we have a lot of coaches, consultants, where maybe they are not like, it's more they don't have a specific piece of technology, but it's more about their knowledge, their differentiator. Where would you get them to start?
Well, actually the same process, because it's about understanding where you fit within your competitive set. So we've heard me say customers, know your competitors, right? Know your market. So you have to figure out where you fit. Here's a great example. I belong to an organization, and it's a networking group. And the very first time I went to this networking group, it was 40 people sitting in the room. By the time it got to me, because I was a guest, I was like number 38. And I had already heard 7 people say, I'm a digital marketing, I'm a brand expert, I'm a strategist. So when it got to me, I was like, what the heck am I going to say that's going to differentiate me? And I'm sure my answer was not very good. Mm-hmm. So during the course of being in the pandemic, and we're doing all these meetings online, I've got to attend a lot of meetings. And so one of the things I did is I actually called up everybody who claimed they were a marketing person or a brand expert, and I had a conversation with them. And the idea is, hey, I'm new to the thing. I want to figure out where you fit, where I fit. And I was able to figure out ways to differentiate myself from what I consider my competitors. Now, that might not be a total strategy, but in investigating how they position themselves on their website, how they position themselves within this organization, I was able to figure out that the guy saying I'm a branding expert, well, he was actually more creative, and he didn't do the strategic work that I did. Right. This person is, I'm a digital marketer. Well, they were really about execution, not about strategy. This person does research. Okay, I do research, but what I found out is they weren't they were pure research people. They're more like data scientists, and they didn't really know what to do with the data once they had it. I know what to do with the data. Matter of fact, one of my biggest competitors in this organization hires me to do their research. And the reason they like me, because I can help interpret the data into marketing, as opposed to just handing them a bunch of data. So from a coaching standpoint and consultant standpoint, like I am, is I always look to figure out who is my competitive set, what can I know about them, and if appropriate, just frankly talking to them to figure out, hey, I just heard about you or whatever, and maybe there's a way we can work together. And in that conversation, I can figure out very quickly whether
Mhm.
they are true competitors or whether there's opportunities.
That's brilliant. I love it. I love the strategy, and in particular because you're doing market research. You are getting clearer as well. I think by it's almost like a process of elimination. It's like, oh, but they don't do this, so suddenly something that is obvious to you now is not obvious anymore
Right.
because the other person doesn't do it, and because you do it now, we automatically assume that they do it too.
Well,
Like
that's
probably in
exactly
your
right.
case, like you might have assumed that all these people were doing the strategic work that you do, but actually they don't. So very
Yeah,
powerful. I really like that.
that's exactly right. As a matter of fact, the opening statement you read about me actually came out of the very process I just told you about.
Hmm.
And when I was describing what I do to people, they said, "Oh, you're like an architect." And I went, "Oh my God, that's
Such
brilliant."
a great metaphor.
And then
Such
I
a great
started to
metaphor.
shape it up, and now I can go into any of these meetings and use that positioning, and nobody else is there.
Hmm.
And so again, it just is a way to separate us from those conversations.
That's brilliant. So, Angelo, it's time to wrap up. What is, if someone wants to reach out to you, get in touch with you? You mentioned already your website. What is it? What is the best way?
Well, best way is really LinkedIn. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I do a lot of publishing and postings, but I always answer those messages. So anybody wants to get in contact, that's the best place to connect with me there. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention my podcast, the Business Growth Cafe, which you were a guest on,
That's
and
how we
hopefully
met. That's
your
how we
audience
met.
will listen to that show as well as this one. We had a great time. That's why you invited me to your show. But
Hmm.
it's been, as I mentioned earlier on, it's been one of my favorite shows this year. We had a lot of fun and a lot of great insights to go along with it. So we
Yeah.
educated through some humor.
It was so fun. I literally, if you're listening to this one, go to the Business Growth Cafe. The website is www.businessgrowthcafe.com, and you can find, just type like Simone Vincenzi. You can listen to the interview that we did as part of his show, and make sure check out also the other episodes, because in particular, if you are around, if you want to know more about marketing and learning from other business owners, is a great podcast to listen to. And the website is www.theponzigroup.com. And then as well, we will have the ebook as well in the show notes that Angelo mentioned earlier about doing your competitor analysis. So all those resources are going to be as well in the show notes. Angelo, final message from you to our listeners. If there is one thing you would say that would wrap up the conversation that we had so far, what would your final message be?
Don't forget the basics. Be persistent and consistent. And I'm going to say it one more time. Know your customer.
There we go. Know your customers, and as well, if you're going to an Italian restaurant, enjoy your meatballs.
Meatballs.
I
Hey.
like. We started with meatballs. The interview, we wrap up with meatballs. And if you're
But
vegan, do vegan meatballs. Yeah.
I literally go to restaurants and I order a salad and meatballs. A lot of times it's just an antipasto and meatballs, and of course bread. It's not good for me, but I love bread, and
I
my
love my bread too. I try to
it's
not to eat too much, but I love my bread too. All right, Angelo, thank you very much for being on the show, and it was an incredible episode. So thank you for being here.
yeah. Thank you, Simone. I really appreciate it.
And if you're listening right now, if you're listening on the podcast, or if you're watching on Facebook right now, you're part of the Facebook group. Thank you for watching. The Facebook group is Explode Your Expert Biz Community. So if you're listening, for example, on the podcast or YouTube, then jump on Facebook, find Explode Your Expert Biz community, and then you can join the group and get the episodes in advance where we live stream them inside the Facebook group. You can ask questions as well to our guest and get a conversation going. If you're listening on a podcast, make sure you subscribe to your favorite podcasting platform and also leave us a review. Let us know what you enjoy the most. If you like what we do, our reviews are really important. They help us spread the message even more. We get more listeners. So if you like the work that we do, really appreciate to take literally 30 seconds to write that review. And if you are watching on YouTube, then make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave me a comment as well under the YouTube channel, and I personally respond to every single comment. Thank you for being part of our community. And until next time, always remember that together we grow exponentially. Bye for now.